Good evening, everyone. How's the sound? Good? Okay. If I start trailing off, you just tell me to forget. So as Stefan mentioned, thank you so much for the introduction. There's some updated information, but you could find it on our website. As you can see, the occasion for my being here is the release of the catalog of nature-based solutions that actually happened already a year ago. And what I realized when I was preparing is that actually a lot of our thinking has evolved since then. But it is a very important project, and I will do my best to introduce it. I want to start for a moment to just remind you, or maybe not remind you if you already forgot, but also just to kind of say thank you to Stefan, because I very much appreciate the definition. And when I say nature-based solutions, and Anne just said she prefers landscape-based solutions, I don't have any qualms with that. That's fine. We can call it either way. But when we talk about landscape, it is a result of the actions and interactions of people with their environment, as you said in the introduction. It is a cultural process, and I just want you to bear that in mind, that this is the definition that we very much like to use, and so it helps us with the terminology. Also, I think the introduction was really beautiful. It really helps to kind of frame the discussions today. And another thing I need to mention is that you will notice that there are a lot of kind of parallels, intersections, and references back to what you just heard, because there's a certain kind of geographic and you can say ethical connection between Anne, Mrs. Byrne, and myself in our practice. And you will see that. So the catalog. The Office of Felix is a young office. It's been around for 8 years. And today I want to share some of the thinking that has evolved during that time and how it led to the catalog. Catalog in many ways was a celebration of our experience, and it allowed us to synthesize a lot of the experience we tested in practice through projects. But the big sort of realization that came with the work on the catalog that took a couple of years is also who we are as an office. It was sort of a process of discovering our own identity. And the important thing I have to say is that we are a proactive office. We're an office that is as much an advocate for climate change adaptation as practitioners. So we advocate through practice, but it is really important for us to have a strong position, which I think we are developing and we have. The other important kind of pillar of our office is we have a research studio. And this guy here, Eduardo, he's a marine biologist who became a landscape architect, and he leads our research studio. So his work and the work of his team, which I sometimes join as well, underpins all of our projects. And going forward is going to play a bigger role. He's a really important member of our team because he really kind of keeps a critical eye on what we do and helps us steer towards things that we really believe in. So he led the catalog of nature-based solutions and really steered the research. So I want you to kind of take into account the fact that we're an international office. So a lot of things that happen in different places have a bearing of how we think about the profession and what we do and our role. So a little bit about the context. Of course, basically in a couple of weeks, we are going to celebrate because it was a celebrity, Hurricane Sandy that happened in New York City. And the reason I mention it is twofold. First of all, it was written about and everybody knew about it. It was the most televised and mediated event. But the other thing that happened with it is that Americans recognized that the expertise in climate adaptation is lacking, and the foresight of Sean Donovan, who led the reconstruction efforts, led him to come to the Netherlands and bring back Henk Ovink and a few other people who actually spearheaded the reconstruction and spearheaded a transformation of understanding of the role of landscape architecture in climate adaptation practice. So it is very much due to that event that several practices in the world really shifted towards nature-based urbanism, or whatever terminology we want to use today. But I think we already have a pretty base, solid shared understanding of what we're talking about. Cities that are based on natural systems. So the Dutch had a very big role to play in it. They influenced the designs. They also brought in very interesting projects. And Michael Kimmelman, a very important kind of influential journalist in the US, also wrote a fantastic article in the New York Times. This is where the image from Rotterdam is from, explaining the Dutch culture of water management and why it is important to bring this expertise. So we are quite grateful for his elevating the profession to a completely new level. So, but a lot of things have happened since then. Sandy, as I said, was a big deal. Of course, the tragic side of things is quite obvious. I don't need to discuss that with you, but also the attention it got was important. But one of the things that happened, and that is really critically important and important to my message today, is that from isolated events like Sandy, and before that, several years prior to that, there was Hurricane Katrina that affected New Orleans and really unearthed the problems that were there, and extreme inequality and inability to restart and rebuild. So social inequality with respect to resilience. So the term resilience really came into the fore after Hurricane Katrina in 2004. And then Sandy brought more international attention and more recognition of the problem. But what happened since is we have had a number of events that happen simultaneously. They're more severe and they all happen at the same time. I think I made a note myself to make this joke, but it is true that the chances of giving a talk about climate change while a major event is happening are much higher today than they were 10 years ago. And as you probably know, Hurricane Ian just landed in Cuba. So there are a couple of images from that. But also those of us who were in Europe this summer probably realized that if you don't like heat, there's no escaping. I went to Sweden thinking, okay, I will have some fresh air. Forget it. It's the same 35 degrees all across. So with that, I think the good thing, and of course, again, the tragic side, I'm not going to touch. Let's stay positive. We're in a profession that actually can be helpful. So the tragic side is that, the serious side that has been recognized is that 63% of land in the European Union is being affected by drought, right? So the data is undeniable. I don't think there's, need to explain that there was a very steep learning curve with the recognition of climate change, but I think the data is all there. There's absolutely no question. And that also helps us. So this just happened 2 days ago in Cuba, a major disruption. And as I already alluded to, it is quite obvious that the ability to recover, to restore to the original condition is quite unequal in different places. So we will see what the reconstruction process brings. So this summer, these are European Union collected some of the best photography of the last summer. So this is drought in Europe this summer. And you could see that the drought doesn't just affect soil, it affects the entire system. It affects the rivers, it affects the tributaries, it affects the life in the water, it affects farmers. I mean, we have to realize that this is not somebody else's problem. This is something that really is quite universal. And we can think of a kind of universalization of this catastrophes. it's interesting that during COVID, we all felt a bit isolated, but also the phenomena of this disease showed that the world is one place. And I hope that this kind of simultaneous and paradoxical recognition that on the one hand, we were isolated in our homes, on the other hand, we were suffering from the same thing, will translate now to the fight for climate adaptation. Because this is what's needed to bring about change. Everybody needs to recognize that it's part of their problem. And we are all, as humanity in general, are affected. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know you know this quite well, but it helps to say that because also tools that we are developing are a bit paradoxical. They're both very local and very global. They're scalable and they can be adjusted to work in different conditions. And I will show it with a catalog. This is the Rhine River this summer. And another quote that I like to, another definition I like to use because it helps to understand what we're talking about when we talk about systemic thinking, when we talk about this transition from nature-based solutions to nature-based systems, is we are definitely referring to the ecosystem, a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. It's close to the definition you gave. I think your definition is even better, but these things are coming together. This is really a paradigm shift. The change of practice from landscape interventions to thinking about systems is a real paradigm shift, and I hope you will see that with the projects. So the context, this is California this summer, so similar things. And this is last summer in Germany. Huge, yeah, I think everybody here probably knows what happened with the floods and the destruction of property. And what's really important with the destruction of cultural heritage, with destruction of livelihoods, with residual pollution of the river. So it's not just an event and then everything goes back to normal. The residual damage is quite strong. This is in Holland, so this is quite close to here. And of course, this kind of events, it's not just something that happens in nature, it has very serious economic ramifications. In fact, one of the pioneering plans, the Cloudburst plan for Copenhagen, started by calculating the costs of damage and the costs of doing nothing. So what happens if you are not addressing the problems? So the climate change and adaptation changes culture in every way. Land use, land practices, work in every aspect. So this is particular to agriculture. This is this year's statistics from droughts in the US. And farmers, a lot of farmers are going bankrupt. And you could see this is quite incredible. If you've ever grown a cactus, you know that they don't need any water, but if there's no water at all, they do die. I have never seen this before. I mean, these are supposed to be the most drought-resistant plants, and it's gone. People are adapting, people are really shifting. Think about it as a civilizational shift in how we go about things. And of course, as a result of all this, fires that are also becoming ubiquitous throughout the globe. This is, so I'm showing you this, not to, as I already said, preach to the choir, but to tell you what context we are working in. Us as a firm, because we feel the urgency, because we started the company to really focus on kind of a new way of practice, practice that is less traditional, but also focus on urgent matters. So sort of the images, I hope, show kind of the spirit that we're missing on. And the bottom line is that the risk landscape has changed in the last 10 years since Sandy. And the probability of very severe impact of different disasters happening at the same time and in several places at the same time is much higher than it was. So this whole concept of, for example, a 100-year flood, very questionable now because it happens, and it's a very misunderstood concept. But that's just goes to the point. So to the Dutch context, for hundreds of years, the Dutch have been known and have imported the knowledge and technology to the whole world, basically. They have been known for an engineered approach to land. So control of nature. Using skills, engineering skills, to create fixed systems. So in a very plain word, you could say it's gray infrastructure, but it's also many other forms of infrastructure that we created. So there's artificial landscapes that were all about us controlling the nature. The shift that has happened in the last 10 years, and I think for most progressive practices that's true, is that from using kind of engineering and landscape skills to create this engineered culture, this controlled landscapes, we now take these landscapes and turn them back into nature. So this is the paradigm shift. With the same tools, we are now working with a different dynamic system. So in this case, this is Room for the River. You all know the project. So we're giving space back to the river instead of trying to fight it. We're working with it. And that's the major paradigm shift that really defines who we are as professionals today. And that creates a totally different land use culture. That creates a different way we interact with the land. With the shift from sort of the control to working with, we are trying to create also resilient systems. As a fundamental principle of all the work that we do at Felix is that our landscapes have to be multidimensional, multifunctional, and productive. Productive from the point of view of biodiversity, productive from the point of view sometimes, and I will show at the end, from the point of view of harvest as well, but productive landscapes and cultural. So they have to give something to the society. This paradigm shift that I am referring to goes back, since we are in the wonderful walls and windows of academia. I can do a little bit of nerdiness here. So I want to attribute the shift to also slightly paradoxical, because the idea was always there, but there were very few practices. So in his book, The Good City Forum, Kevin Lynch describes three theoretical urban models: the city of God, the city as a machine, and the ecological city. And the ecological city was always there. I think he wrote the book in the 60s, but there were very few examples. It's a kind of a funny story. I'm glad that you showed a few examples that I actually didn't know. It was a wonderful discovery, but it's always troublesome to find the examples. I mean, the first two are really easy, but the last one, and there is a discussion that this is also associated with the timeline of history. I'm not sure that is. I think this shift now will really lead us to this model fully, or at least that's the goal. So another paradox that I want to kind of highlight is that the city as a machine, some of the original models that explained it actually gave space for nature and buffer zones, but that was never the case in implementation. So the model was better than the reality in many ways. This is Detroit. And so now we are kind of uniting the models with the actual implementation. So this shift, what does it require? It requires thinking at different scales. I am, of course, repeating things that were already said, but maybe that's that's what makes us a community of practice, a community of believers and people who understand each other on this level. So the integrated approach starts with regional thinking, understanding the location of the place. Urban, so really thinking of city as a whole and connected to the region, and then local, but also connected back to the systems. And then every system, and then all these approaches are underpinned by systems that support, provide the working of the entire system. I will explain this using the project. So basically, it works on every scale, from the courtyard to the region, from the built environment to sometimes even your windowsill. So think of it as, you know, if you use the nature-based approach, it is most kind of fundamentally important at the regional scale. Okay, I jumped to the projects to show how we actually use it. This is a project in China. I like to say that this is one of the very first resiliency projects that was implemented. For many, many years, there were conversations about, you know, how do we address climate change? Do we have the tools? This is actually a build project. So the way it was designed is using this thinking of a problem and how can we provide multiple benefits while solving this problem. In this case, there were very strong hurricanes affecting the area and waves that were continuously destroying the waterfront. So we looked at this at the larger section and tried to see how the regional approach can be basically applied here. The idea came very much based on the Dutch experience and also this kind of cross-sectional thinking. And it's a concept of a triple dike where the whole system basically gives you space for use, but also protects from the environment. This is a section. So you can see that basically this dikes that if we had a different way of thinking would be just utilitarian structures, are actually part of public space. This is under construction. So every part of the system can be used, can be inhabited, and of course, creates layers of protection to the villages that were quite vulnerable and quite affected continuously. So you create a beach, you create a promenade, you create a wonderful boulevard, all the systems working together to offset the effect of the waves, but also manage water on site. And the systems that convey water from the top also become part of public space. So it's an integrated solution in that utilitarian concerns and concerns for providing public space, usable public space, completely merge. And if I didn't tell you, maybe you would not understand that, know that this is a water conveyance system. So it also creates space for people to interact, to conduct small business, maybe. So there are multiple benefits. And this is what I am getting closer to talk about the catalog. This is what creates co-benefits. This is the space during the rain. And this is an image from before. So for many years before we were asked to create this catalog, the nature-based solutions were part of our, we didn't use the term, but were part of our practice, were integral part of our practice in different ways, in forests and terraces and different things. The thinking for nature-based solutions came from the same source that Anne just mentioned. We all read Design with Nature and believe in the system. We also, I personally definitely consider Frederick Olmsted the forefather of this approach. Of course, he never used the term nature-based solutions, but he implemented projects that demonstrate this approach. This is Emerald Necklace in Boston, a system that basically protects a large part of Boston from floods. Also, he coined a lot of the terminology that is fundamental, including cultural landscape. He brought together in his landscape all the concerns that are dear to us now, such as sanitation, public health, public health in terms of inviting people to do sports, to walk, So all the things that we are now packaged in different terminology, like livable city, walkable city, 5-minute city, 15-minute city, all of those things, if you read his Civilizing American Cities, that was written more than 100 years ago, it's all there. But he also, in addition to being a pretty decent writer, he also made fantastic projects. And of course, you all know his Central Park in New York, so he gets news. The fantastic thing about the Emerald Necklace is that it's a working system that is still functional. And in addition to providing this everyday culture for the neighborhood, it also invites other culture. It inspires other culture. This is an installation, a folk installation 5 years ago, where a Japanese artist installed this folk producing structures and really highlighted the importance of the space and created an amazing experience for children and adults in a kind of an homage to the great landscape master. Okay, the catalog. First of all, since this is we are trying to respond to many universal challenges, we are open source. So it's an open source resource. You can download it in full. You can see that there are 12,666, awful number, downloads already. And it's all there. The catalog was commissioned by the World Bank. We had a number of partners that worked on it with us, and I will explain a bit about it. So the definitions are to read, but I will explain the structure of the catalog and how it works. Who is it for? First of all, it is for people who get funding from the World Bank or who work at the World Bank. What does it do? It synthesizes all different nature-based solutions to different problems and explains how to use them. So it's a sort of a collection, right? Well, catalog pretty much says it, but it's a collection that is extremely user-friendly. So there's a lot of science behind it, there's a lot of research, but it is extremely accessible. This was part of the thing we wanted to do. It can work in the developing world, in the developed world, whatever politically correct or incorrect terminology you want to use. It's a tool to be used by managers, by funders, but also by local communities. So its accessibility is one of its most important things. It has a fantastic kind of reader's guide in the beginning that actually tells you how to use it, because it then begins to be sort of like it has instructions and then it has tools. We organized different solutions into families. So the families are urban forests, terraces and slopes, streams, building solutions, so for architecture, open green spaces, green corridors, urban farming, bioretention areas, natural inland wetlands, constructed inland wetlands, river floodplains, mangroves, salt marshes, and sandy shores. You probably notice that there's a theme of water underpinning all of them. That kind of goes to say is that we do feel the strongest about our water management capacities. There are now issues with drought and fires that we would like to tackle. This is kind of our next stage of research, but these are the issues we felt we could really address. And our underpinning message, how am I doing on that? Okay, and now the underpinning message that you can use them as individual solutions, but they are most efficient when they're used in conjunctions with each other in the system. The great thing about the solutions is that they are scalable, right? And they're also all processes. So you're not creating a fix, it's not a pipe. You're creating a process. Somebody said the other day, so you're ecosystem architects. So this is a very good definition. Yes, we are creating, restoring, making new ecosystems. And they're by definition dynamic. So this is, again, a different type of thinking. So for the catalog, one of its kind of user-friendly features is it helps practitioner or funder to understand how to select one or another solution. So there are criteria that we propose for evaluating them. It's a performance criteria, and these are criteria that we also very, very much use in all of our projects. So it's the capacity of this intervention or solution to perform its task, right? It could be infiltration, it can be shading, it can be cooling or evapotranspiration, any of the selected. We have to check if they have, and I think, maybe in the future we should really talk about using more data and how research really helps with this. We used a lot of research for this, but there are next problems to be addressed. So it's very important that all of these are, on the one hand, a lot of them are indigenous practices, local practices that were there for years. They were never called nature-based solutions, but they're tested and they, work. Sometimes don't work, but basically we didn't invent them. We understood them and checked if they work with data. So this is the bridge between academia and practice that is very important, and this is what we do with our research studio. Because actually, not all local practices are good. I've interviewed a couple of people in Germany last summer who said, oh yeah, we lost our house like 10 times already because they don't want to move. This is a different subject about managed retreat, but not all local solutions work. You can think that you're managing flood while you're having a lot of damage, but you're not moving. Is that a successful solution? You just keep living there? Maybe not. So these solutions are tested and they're demonstrated with best practices. So for the criteria of evaluation, performance, functions, and one of the other really important factors in selecting and really judging whether some project it should be funded or not is benefits for people. So social benefits, sometimes referred to as co-benefits. Benefits that bring communities together, benefits that create opportunities for recreation, benefits that sometimes create opportunities to use the results of nature-based solutions for craft. So the other important criteria, or these are the criteria we translated into 3 categories, which are basically protect, enhance, and create. So protect is the, where is it? Sorry. Protect is fundamentally the most important one. We agree to that in our team. Enhance is a very desirable. And create, if it's possible, then we create something new, but definitely new land use or new attractive place, right? So how do we choose? Like, why did I start talking about the regional solutions, the local, the citywide? Because when you evaluate the site, for the first thing you do, and you showed it in the introduction, it used to be called watershed-based planning. Now we call it nature-based solution at the regional scale, but basically that's the idea. You actually look, and you now have all the technologies at your fingertips. You look at where the city is located in the larger regional system. If it's a mountainous city, if it's a river city, delta city, coastal city, they all have appropriate solutions, and you start with the bigger system. And the ultimate goal is to actually reconnect the entire regional landscape ecology, landscape mosaic. You probably know the work of Richard Foreman, who wrote several books about landscape mosaic and how it works. This is very much the ultimate goal is to definitely reconnect with the system. However, it's practically never possible, so we do more local things. So then at the river basin scale, as an example, you look at what were the ecosystems there, where they are located, what is the connection between them, and how, what level of restoration they need, and what solutions can be applied to what problems. So you do an analysis at this, but you really look at the larger situation. You do the same with the city scale, evaluating, and the catalog gives you the tools to evaluate. It gives you the criteria for evaluation. And gives you the options. What else does the catalog do? It gives you data. translated into very simple, layman, accessible terms. It explains the processes behind different nature-based solutions, the actual dynamic and what to look for and understand. It visualizes it, which is really important when you work with clients who are not designers. It visualizes it in a very accessible way. Of course, it explains it. It also gives you understanding of the social benefits and helps you select the site. So this is very important. It does give an idea of costs, but I have to say costs really vary globally, and that is something that really needs to be evaluated if you begin to practice in place. And it shows you best practices. And of course, in the last year, a lot of new best practices emerged. So that part maybe is still inspiring, but less up to date. So again, you check the position, you look at the scale of intervention and compare it against your budget, and you see how you are fulfilling these three goals of protection, rehabilitation, and creation. So this is an example of how processes are explained, what actually the intervention does for the ecosystem, for the biodiversity, and for people, and how it performs its key function of protecting. This is an example of visualization. And these are different visualizations for different solutions. And then it sometimes gives you special techniques for special geographies, because, as I said, these are universal, but also each one needs to be adapted to a particular location. We use a lot of icons to help communicate the kind of key messages and not be too repetitive and user-friendly. We explain the benefits in each of the catalogs. And then suitability, so how do you just select, each site also has a criteria, environmental performance, technical performance, and possibility of implementation. It's suitability for urban application, and then maintenance is the one part that we were not commissioned to analyze, because that's actually the next step for the World Bank, and it's very much location-based. As I said, also for costs. And then the best practices that give you a whole lot of references. So there are 14 families. I will go quickly through one. What are we doing this time?
Maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. So great. So one of the examples of the solution, and right now kind of my favorite, is the urban forest. So you could see that basically in each of the categories they can be found. Regional, city, and neighborhood, obviously. Somebody mentioned microforest today. I think that maybe it was yesterday, but microforest is the new concept that is, it's interesting how we package all these ideas in the new words. Anyway, the consideration, the evaluation process looks at the capacity of the forest to protect, to restore the ecosystem and biodiversity, and to create a new place. So the processes of, as an example, the process that forest facilitates, they basically, it's the entire environmental cycle, right? This is what you learn in grade school, but you know, sometimes it's that simple, but essentially super important. And you know, there's data now that shows the amazing impact that urban forests have in climate adaptation. I will read just a few. They're pretty known. So air cleaning, carbon sequestration, cooling, evaporation, restoration, infiltration, aquifer recharge, and of course they're great to have around. I mean, at the end of the day, who doesn't like sitting under a tree and hanging out with a friend? I mean, it all comes down to also something we like to be around. So to to help deal with clients, deal with communities, bring people together, build consensus, visualizations are very helpful. Forests, forests are your quintessential kind of a poster child of regional ecosystem management. You want forests to be connected. There's a very elegant theory of connectivity in forests. The more connected they are and the bigger the patches of forests are, the more biodiversity you have, the more mammals you have, the more birds you have, and the more viable and sustainable the system is. It's a geometric formula, basically. So forests really explain this kind of connectivity, the advantage of connectivity. But forests can also have very different functions. So phytoremediation, you probably all know that in the period after kind of the old industry died, some post-industrial sites were remediated using trees that have metabolic functions that absorb metals. That's actually an ecosystem service that is really rarely mentioned, but that's a very important service, ecosystem service that is provided to us by trees. Ecological corridors, so giving species possibility to move. No species can live without movement, and we're talking about everything from ants to foxes to deer. So movement is essential. Without the corridors, they can't move. Agroforestry, one of the projects I will show very briefly, we implement a productive forest near Utrecht that delivers harvest every summer and is now connected. So there are many functions. It's multi-dimensional that the forest provides. And we chart them, give them icons so it's easier to communicate. The forests also help with flood regulation, and I don't want to go into this technical details, but the important point that it's the multiplicity of services, multiplicity of benefits, and the kind of if you multiply if you apply them systemically, you get more. One tree plus another tree doesn't equal, yeah. Okay, so you can download the site, see the examples. There are many solutions, and I will show very quickly how we implement it. So we now work in Iceland, where we are advancing afforestation. After 400 years of deforestation that started with the colonization of the country or with the occupation of the country, we are now using our knowledge of ecosystem management to bring back forests. And the forests that we are advocating are not for the forest's sake. They are also mitigational landscapes. They are landscapes that mitigate wind, that allow other landscapes to emerge. So this is one application. This is the extent of the forest application that we are working on now. And the important thing is that we are working with the communities, because municipalities in Iceland can't start this kind of projects by themselves. So our role here is to deliver the knowledge, to share it, and to inspire them. So they're now applying for what's called the Bond Challenge to get grants from the government to actually implement large-scale afforestation. The other project that we do is very local. So this is a regional one. The local application of nature-based solution. This is the street design guide for Groningen that actually takes infrastructure and brings it to the surface. So it's a shift in kind of approach from the old-fashioned engineering to the new systemic approach at the level of the street, creating a lot of new public spaces and a completely different culture of street. And the last project I show, and I'm wrapping up, is Rhinebleed, which is also implemented. This is by far the most fantastic project, which has over 200 species of trees, and everything that is planted there is productive. They are not just pears, but also pollen for bees, and a million other advantages for everyone, including bees and butterflies and children and parents and their parents. So it's an entirely productive landscape that you can now visit to see what I mean, a systemic approach, where understanding natural dynamic underpins urbanism. This is where nature becomes specific. And that's it. Thank you.
for your great story. But I'm sure there are some questions now from the board. No?
Was it clear? I feel like I said
So
Thank
that's the
you.
reason that there are no questions. Yeah.
Hi, so you at Felix are of course an international project, right?
Yes, I'm actually responsible for the US for a kind of, well, I do Iceland project in Iceland internationally, but also right now we're starting to do some work in the US.
And I also understood that these principles, these strategies are as generalizable as you imagine that they can be, considering each of these systems. So I was wondering what is Felix's approach to adapting each of them to the different cultures, and how do you actually use, I don't know, maybe like Anne was showing, use the social capital and the community as enablers of these processes, and also consider the social and cultural aspects in this, let's say, the
Yeah, that's a great question. The last slide that I showed you saw this goals, but actually Rhinefleet is a perfect example where actually all the tree planting was done by the locals, all the planning was done with as a co-design process, and it's a totally normal part of our practice. Before the term nature-based solutions entered our vocabulary, it was already a completely normal part of our practice, but we, with this catalog, we realized, it was kind of a process of defining our own identity, because it really gave us a solid understanding of our approach. We worked in, I don't know.
But sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
but
please do.
maybe you can give one example of a principle which turned out to be very different in different contexts. So the local adaptation made you to
Iceland.
arrive at different.
Okay. It's definitely
choices.
Iceland. When I started working in Iceland 2 years ago, nothing you bring with you is working there. You really need to understand. And so the first half a year, I spent interviewing every forester and every scientist in the country, because also I interviewed scientists in other countries for the project, and their understanding was quite different. So the local knowledge was very, very different from what Europeans write about Iceland, etc. There was a lot of confusion. So, and also understanding of soil, of air. For example, I was continuously looking for ways to deal with wind dynamic until an engineer told me, actually, wind comes from all sides. So it's not like you can create a barrier here. You really, your entire kind of habits of design are challenged in Iceland. You really need to kind of forget everything you habitually do and start really, really thinking about what is this place about, how does it work, and how do the systems work. And you will get there, because fundamentally it is the same. I mean, it is an ecosystem, but it isn't.
But
just
that raises
really
the question from the other way around, because then you can say, okay, start from scratch and we start to understand the system, and together with the people we co-create the knowledge and ideas. So what's the value of the principles in the catalog then? So the idea of having principles, let's put it like that.
Yeah, the co-benefits, for example. So one of the principles is that you choose for maximum benefits, right? And the benefits of trees, for example, are still the same. They're only multiplied because there are no other protective systems. So it's almost like a magnification of the principle. It's not. So I'll explain. So forest in Iceland is not it's not just trees. It's actually gives the possibility for public space to exist as such. What I mean is, if you we have no time to show it, but if you come out to the open space, after 5 minutes, you as a European or American, you just can't be there anymore. You can't even imagine going swimming or doing exercise outdoors. Icelanders are much more robust than us, and they like outdoor activities, but they are also suffering from this. So you need shelter, basically. But how do you combine shelter and outdoor? So trees are our solution, trees and landscape, because trees don't survive without the hills that you need to build for them. actually trees make it possible for people to use the landscape. It's almost like landscape creates the landscape. Does it make sense? It's a very interesting kind of a circular thinking that you need to intervene in the landscape to make the landscape usable, to make it possible to bike, walk, and enjoy.
I see two more questions here.
I totally agree. I visit Iceland very frequently. And a long time ago, I studied Icelandic forestry and with Erik Luiten, who's professor here. And we came to the conclusion that, that like Iceland has big problems with sheep farming.
Yeah.
The sheep, they eat everything and they destroy the natural vegetation. And that's why also the native forest has disappeared. And I think when you talk about nature-based solutions, then I think what's the strategy? And what do you write in your catalog? Because you can plant trees, but you can also restore the natural vegetation by keeping the sheep out.
Oh,
And it's a very effective way to restore the vegetation. You get the native forest, the birch trees and the small willows, and instead of planting these conifers, which are not actually don't suit the landscape there. And yeah, so how do you, like, that's my question. With the catalog, it suggests that you can cover all things. You have all the solutions in the catalog.
Well, all the known solutions.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
you have to still invent.
So there's a little danger that maybe not all the solutions or the right solutions
Absolutely.
are in the catalog.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But with Iceland, I will explain. So the sheep are a problem, but the real issue is wind and erosion. So because it's already deforested, if you just stop the sheep, by the way, there are much less sheep, the trees don't come back. So the intervention is necessary to bring them back. And of course, to keep the sheep out. It's not like the successional story in the European forest where if you stop touching it, it'll just come back. You know what we see in the Ruhrgebiet area where it does come back, and the native species come back, and some, you know, it's true. In Iceland, it doesn't happen because the wind kills all the seeds. You basically cannot collect. The seeds don't have time to germinate and get any traction. They're just blown into the sea. And the other problem is the sea is bringing in the wind with salt that kills vegetation. So there's this whole system is continuous movement. So without the intervention and the creation of shelter, you basically cannot do any restoration, which is what you can do in other areas. And I'm sure you've seen, and Anne showed, I think, an example of the backyard where nature just happened because nobody was bothering it. Yeah, but no, we don't for a moment think that catalog has all the solutions. It's more like known solutions and solutions that are fairly trustable, reliable.
Fair enough. Thank you. Maybe a last question from Alexander.
Well, actually, I have two.
Okay, maybe one for the time's sake.
One is very short. Well, at my office in PPL, we also kind of developed a nature-based solution catalog. But I don't think it's a beautiful website, but I don't think it works. And my question is, what do you think? Would your catalog work without you being involved in it?
Yeah,
That's one
that's the whole
question.
idea.
And then another question is also.
No, but the answer is that it is supposed to be working by itself. That's why we use very accessible communication tools.
The second one, because you talk a lot about the relationship between people and landscape, or people and nature, and the knowledge that is available, local knowledge, let's say. did you notice, because you travel all around the world, my impression here, I'm a foreigner, okay, who lives here 30 years, that Dutch people know a lot about landscape. Average Dutch person knows a lot about landscape. And is that like that? Well,
Yeah,
where I
yeah,
come
absolutely.
from, it's not like that, but is that correct?
I think so. I
That we
mean,
are extremely attached.
when I graduated from MIT, I had 30 job interviews and I had a lot of choices. And I came to work here because I felt that the approach here was the culture of design and the culture of landscape design was so much stronger. So I, forget the advantages of living home and, I came here because of this extreme level of knowledge and commitment to landscape. So it was a very personal decision. And then I moved back and came back the second time. So yes, I think there is an incredibly embedded culture of landscape, and there are people who do incredibly beautiful work, designers and non-designers working with the land in this country. Yeah, and for the catalogs, we should have a festival because there are a few great catalogs out there.
Yes, I totally agree. But I would like to thank you very much for your
Thank
nice
you.
contribution to this session. So please give her a hand.
Thank you.